Okay, so we've talked about mechanics. We've talked about what tanking is. We talked about which tank you should play and whether or not there's a wrong one. And of course, I'm sure everybody already has an opinion without going and seeing those videos. Um, this is a lot of information. So how do I just get started learning? And then when I'm playing other roles, because you just mentioned at the end of the last video that we should be trying other roles to get more perspective, how do I know, maybe as a healer, for example, that I can tell that the tank is uncomfortable or that the tank doesn't know something? Besides just like suggesting how to play in chat, like how do I adjust my playstyle to kind of the common pitfalls of a newer tank?
Let me phone a friend. Uh-huh. No, it's as a new tank. Yeah. No, he doesn't know anything. Have you played Guild Wars? Okay, he's played Guild Wars.
I have.
Oh, you just wanted to know it doesn't matter? Okay, thanks.
Into Dragons looks good.
If you're not too if you're not too keen on wanting to do things blind, you can look up stuff from other people. You can look up videos. You can maybe just look up a timeline. You could familiarize yourself with old fights to get knowledge for what's yet to come.
What's a timeline? Having
A
come from
timeline.
WoW, that is something that would work differently.
Okay, that is beautiful. In other games, a boss or even a dungeon, right? Just the enemies may pull from a pool of mechanics. Maybe they're going to do a stack and then a spread and then a stack and then a stack again and then a stack again and then maybe now they're going to do nothing for a little while. In Final Fantasy XIV, there is a sequence from start to finish that will happen in almost the same order every time. Maybe at 2 minutes into the fight, the boss may do a spread or a stack, or it might do, a buster or a shared attack. But everything up and around that points will always happen at the same time. And at that 2 minute moment, one or the other will always happen. In that way, Final Fantasy is very much a dance that you can learn before you've even gone in, because it has a timeline. It has a timeline with a set order of events. And that is something that I feel like, to the best of my knowledge, doesn't really happen in any other game. Now that I'm thinking about it, I can't think of another game where it does exactly that.
Not to this level of rigidity, and that does make Final Fantasy sound like, well, wouldn't that just make it easy then? Wouldn't that make it boring if it's always the same dance? Because
But
effectively
the
our rotations are playing
execution's
Rock Band, and our fight is
right.
playing Dance Dance Revolution. And so once I
Mhm.
can play Rock Band while doing Dance Dance Revolution, isn't it just on repeat?
Yeah, but also each role has something different. And sometimes there are mechanics that target specific players, so you may be doing something different each bolt.
Okay.
Sometimes, maybe one random player is going to have to go over here, and three random players are going to have to go this way, and two people are going to have to buddy up, and that could change from pull to pull. Maybe your role on that particular fight doesn't have an adjustable responsibility. Maybe it just has to do one of two things, and that's it, ever. Other times you may have to be ready to do one of four things. So there is monotony, but in another sense, it's like doing something that's familiar to you. There is a comfort in that, and
Sure.
it helps you enjoy the experience, especially in Final Fantasy. This game is very big on being able to walk away and do other things if you'd like.
Sure.
So being able to take a break for 3 months and come back and just step right back in like riding a bike, there's a niceness about it.
That does also lend itself back to where you were headed before I interrupted with the common pitfalls, right? Because the common pitfalls also become patterns because it's the
They do.
same sequences that are getting missed over and over and over. It feels like the newer players are missing the same things as other newer players because I guess the game just either didn't present them enough on the front end, or they were different than where most players are coming from, or they're just more opaque as mechanics, or they require a higher skill capability to get right, or the punishment doesn't feel like something they maybe notice. Some people like they're like, wow, this today I was running a fight from Shadowbringers and like this boss kept turning the same guy into a frog every single time, and it's like,
Something's
I,
happening. But what is it?
are you used to being a frog? Like, why is this not
Yeah.
like, hey, maybe
You're
I should
choosing it.
stop. Nobody else is becoming a frog. Maybe I should question why I keep getting turned into a frog. And so sometimes we all just don't notice that we're getting turned into a frog in whatever the exact mechanic of a fight may be because we don't you're just like, man, I feel like
Maybe
this
you were
boss is
staring at your
killing me.
attacks or your buttons or something else, or you were looking at how cool your glamour was, and you might just miss
Sure.
the tell. That happens. That happens.
So
I would
what's
say
the big ones?
so. Earlier we talked about how the timeline is something that's unique to this game,
Hmm.
and it becomes a little monotonous if you're used to it, or fun. I would say in another vein, this game is also unique in that it doesn't. It's kind of cryptic and it's nostalgic. Like I used to play a lot of old games when I was younger, so I like being able to figure things out as I go.
Hmm.
But nowadays, that's not common where a game does not innately tell you how to play. Final Fantasy does not do a good job at teaching you this is your rotation.
No.
These are mechanics to watch out for. This does that. They teach you by experiencing it.
Yes, the
You
terms of
fail it,
service
you
actually
fuck it up,
stops
and
you
you
from
fix.
technically using any of the tools that would accelerate that process.
Correct. Correct. So if they want you to see a mechanic where maybe you have to follow a clone of yourself for 30 seconds and then figure out how it did things so that you can do it correctly, that's how you do it. There's no journal telling you what to expect. You just get in there and you rip the band-aid off, right? And I feel like that's something that is unique to Final Fantasy as well. I can't think of another game nowadays that does that. So it's kind of up to the players to educate one another when it's warranted. Don't ever just force somebody like, hey, dummy, you got to listen. That's not nice. But if you're like, hey, um, I struggled with this mechanic. Would you like to know how I overcame it, or something like this is what really helped me. Maybe if we could all do this, it would be a little bit easier for our white mage. What do you think? Things like that might be a little bit easier to approach with, and just in general, I think the point we're getting at is that with the pitfalls in this game, I would say the number one thing I see players do, and this happens a lot in bigger 24 player alliance raids, is you'll see a marker where it's pointing arrows in to indicate that other people need to come to you, and you're like, oh, an attack is coming at me. I need to run away from everybody, and so players will take a stack marker just away, and that's just one example of something where I think everybody else goes, "Hey, what are you doing, dude? What are you doing? Get back here!" And that guy's like, "I'm saving everybody," and then they die, right? And they're like, "It's a good thing I took." They might not think this was a stack.
Yeah,
They
no,
might think it's a good thing I
that
got
missile
away
came
because
down and wrecked
everyone would have
me.
died.
Thank God I didn't drag that missile into the party.
Right. And that happens. That happens. So it's up to us to help educate. And I would say common pitfalls are just maybe sometimes people try to associate this game with another game a little too much. Maybe they're like, I don't need to pay attention to my HP bars on my party list. I can get rid of that bar because I'll never have to look at it. And then they're like, oh well, there's a bunch of debuffs. What's a debuff? Where do where do I look at that? Why isn't it above my head? And so this game has just things that you have to get used to. I would say is probably the most important thing. Is the UI is very indicative and helpful. More than other games. A lot of people will mod other games. I don't think this game needs to be modded. I don't know if you would agree or disagree, but I think this game does a good job at having the information presented if you know how to look for it.
I don't play 14 with any mods, no shaders, no nothing, and I have used a DPS meter out of curiosity, but I had played for years and was fine without it. I just wanted to have additional information that
I
the
think
game was
most
offering
most
to
people have
optimize.
some self improvement, right?
Yeah, and I really didn't care what everybody else was doing in the party outside of using that for a sense of scale, right? So if there was somebody else playing my job in the party, and
Like,
I saw
oh,
that they were in
that
similar
dragoon
gear,
is doubling me.
they're
Like, what's
doubling me.
going
Okay,
on?
yeah, that starts to inform me of something. Not like I'm going to send a message to somebody like, you're 5% below me, terrible player.
No, but if you're like every pull, it looks like we're doing the same thing, but they're just trouncing me. What are
what
they doing?
what am I missing? And so that's mostly what I looked into it for. It is technically against terms to use that, and so use it at your own risk. It's not something I feel I would even need to keep on my computer at all times because like now I feel pretty good. But like when I was first trying to optimize, it was a really helpful tool, and I wish the game had more in that way. Because the tools it has in game really don't reach to that level when you're looking for self improvement. But I think the common pitfalls, like when I'm not tanking, as I level up all my other jobs, the one that jumps out is there seems to be this idea of underpulling and overpulling, where people feel
Like in a dungeon. right?
Mm-hmm.
Not
In a
obviously not on
dungeon.
a boss.
On a boss, there's just the one boss. We don't do a lot of trash in this game where there's little things to kill as as we move into newer and newer content. That's kind of been a thing of the past. But in dungeons, we do still get kind of little guys, little guys, little guys, boss, little guys, little guys, little guys, boss, and you do that for a series of bosses, and that's a dungeon. They're kind of in hallways now, so they're all unavoidable. You're going to have to kill them. You can only pull so many before there's a wall, so it's not like WoW where you could literally just pull all the way to the boss and bring the trash with you. You're going to get stopped, and so I see tanks feel that they have to ask a healer whether or not it's okay, is something I've been told. It is polite to ask, but I don't feel you have to ask, and I think that would be weird because we have a number of console players who that would be a huge burden to type that out every time.
Or maybe you're just, what if you're somebody who's introverted, you just got home from a long day of work and you just wanted to chill and not interact with anybody, but you need to just run the dungeon, so you're just, you're just there, you're vibing, and maybe they're okay with big pulls, maybe they're not, but they just
Right.
don't want to type.
Right. And so I think where I start to see is pacing is one of the things where they're uncomfortable with a pace faster or slower than they want to go. They don't want to be told to pull slower, or a DPS pulls ahead of them because the DPS is in a hurry, and or just wants it to use their AoE rotation. They're like, hey, we're down to one guy here. That's really boring. Let's add some guys to this. And
Because maybe a sense of trust.
they're like,
as
well,
well,
if
do
they
you think?
pulled it, that's it. And I think if the person's pulling over and over and they've been told not to, and we've wiped and all that, yeah, let that guy do their thing. And if they want to go die in a corner, then that's fine. But like a lot of times, a tank, it's a chance to be like, all right, let's do it, and just adjust and go pull that off of them.
You've been leveling monk a little bit, and you said bard too, right? So I think one thing you might agree or disagree that tanks may not even, if you've only played tank, you might not even know this, is other jobs have a resource, and sometimes those resources are on a timer, and they're pulling an ad to keep that resource going, or they get crippled, right? Like they're just entirely derailed.
Right.
So sometimes you could be pulling a little too slow, not because people are safe or unsafe, but simply because they just can't do. They're like, I want to get this attack out, and if I don't do this in 3 seconds, I can't.
And the counterpoint to that, especially in a Realm Reborn dungeons, before we have a full kit, is sometimes tanks pull really hard. They barely survive, and then they pull hard again,
tools.
and all of their healer burned literally every long running cooldown that they have. And so all their abilities are on a timer before they're allowed to use them again. And they're like, well, we lived through, I pulled 10 things and we lived. I pulled 7 things and we didn't live. What's up with that? And the healer's like, yes, I have mana, because a lot of people who come from other games are like, oh, I have mana. Like, yes, I have mana, but like, I don't have the ability I want to use the mana on,
Right.
because I
Or
had to
a lot
burn
of abilities
everything
don't
to keep
cost
you alive.
mana, right? So
They're
you're
just
like,
time.
I don't know that you have this or don't have this.
Right.
Because again, we don't have a tool that tells us in game.
As opposed to in other MMOs, a lot of times the healer is best gauged their capabilities by watching their mana bar. And so the amount of healing output they have remaining is this battery charge button right next to their health. And as long as the battery is full, you should keep pulling. That's not necessarily true in 14, especially in lower level content, which is where I think a lot of people learn tanking. So overpulling and underpulling are two
you make
things
a really
that I
good
see
point
that.
about lower level dungeons. A lot of jobs don't even have area of attack effects that splash damage at low levels.
Dragoon doesn't
so
have it till
pulling
40,
a lot of creatures
42, something like that. It's forever.
So pulling a lot of creatures wouldn't even help or speed things up because there's literally just nothing to do to them.
Right. So I think adjusting to your party comp and adjusting to the play style of the players, if you see the Black Mage with you, Black Mage is a great AoE class. I know that. Cool. Very cool. They got big booms. And you see that your Black Mage is only casting single target damage. I don't think this conversation is about let's call out all the people that are doing it objectively worse. It's, okay, how do I adjust to that? No. I have a single target mage with me. I understand that Black Mages as a whole have AoE, but this Black Mage doesn't.
But this person doesn't. Right.
Based on
so
their
you
actions.
have two approaches. You could either one say, "Hey, would it be okay if you started using Blizzard 2? Is that their AoE?
I think
Blizzard
it's
2
the
Fire
twos.
2, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're like, is it okay if you use those? And if they say yes, then great, you can speed it up. If they say no, then I wouldn't fight. I would just play around it.
Slow the
You've been
dungeon down.
given the information you need to succeed in that dungeon with those players. Use it.
So I think that's the big pitfall that I see when I go with other tanks, where I'm like, we are going obnoxiously slow, or we're dying because we're going too fast. And I mean, the middle ground's actually pretty wide, but we are just going painfully slow, or we are just hauling and then dying and then hauling butt and then dying. Pacing is something that I really notice. I think the other thing I notice is that tanks don't use their low level mitigation. the low level stuff, they just don't use it at all. And some of it doesn't naturally put on your bar. Some of it does not start on your bar.
Some of it doesn't even unlock until later.
Right.
How about instead of that, I could think of an even bigger pitfall. How many tanks have you seen that holds their mitigation for the boss because they think the boss is more dangerous than the trash pulls? So I could tell you something right now. Being attacked by like 9-10 enemies is going to be way more dangerous than being hit by one enemy with a paste damage.
Especially for things like reprisal. So you have roll actions, and the first thing I see in low-level tanks is a lot of them aren't using their roll actions at all. And when you have things like reprisal, what reprisal does is it drops the incoming damage by a flat 20% to all targets that it hits. And so 20% off of 20 guys adds up to way more damage saved, way more of your health that you didn't have to lose, than 20% off of a boss who swings his big axe once every freaking 10 seconds. And so it's like, yeah, I mean, that it's going to save you 20% off of like 1-2 hits, as opposed to all those guys that are just wailing away on you. Reprisal really helps. Arm's length. We use arm's length in boss encounters and in raid encounters mostly as an anti-knockback. But arm's length actually has a secondary effect that says slow, and that reduces swing speed. Slow,
which doesn't work on bosses, by the way.
It doesn't work on bosses. That is literally just for trash
work
pulls.
on bosses.
And so that reduces swing speed. It's heavy is how we call how fast we move. Slow means how often they swing. And that does a very similar thing to reprisal in that it just makes all those guys take a chill pill, and that gives your healer more time to mitigate. So like low level mitigation, when they are overpulling and they're like, how come this healer's not keeping up? Well, maybe the healer doesn't know what they're doing. Maybe the healer is undergeared. Maybe the healer just wanted chill content. This isn't what they signed up for. And you could just slow down and adjust that healer's pace. Or you could help them out and keep pulling at this pace, but you've got to pull some of the weight. Right. And you've got to start using that mitigation in dungeons.
And in some cases, pulling more and using all of your mid at once might be better than you might think pulling like, oh, this healer's having trouble, I'm going to pull slower. And in some cases, it also runs their cooldowns out completely, right? Because they just don't have anything, because maybe the damage is really good, but because you're pulling slowly, people are blowing their cooldowns. You're like, oh, this ad set died really fast, let's pull more. And then you pull more and you're like, this is dying really slow, because people used all of their steroids, which are the buffs, that's the damage increasing abilities. They're gone. They don't have them anymore because they used them all. And you're like, well, what am I going to do now? Am I just going to be a dog rolling around on a bed, or what are we doing here? Well, we don't know, but
But if you want to see these, if you want to talk through them, Ren regularly coaches over on Twitch and tells people, how they can improve their play, especially within the hardest fights. You've cleared some of the hardest fights in the game. You've literally cleared one of them over 400 times. So you know the fights decently well at this point. And I think that's a great place to go learn exactly what the common pitfalls are you can look for and how you play around them. Because a lot of times when you're teaching these people, you teach one group to play the boss a little differently than you teach another group, because rather than somebody not being able to do a mechanic and you saying, well, I guess this group's just going to fail, you say, okay, well then how do we adjust around that? And so definitely go stop by Ren Karigani over on Twitch TV anytime at night. He streams like 90 million hours a week. So if the sun is down in the US, he's probably live. So go enjoy that, and we'll keep these conversations rolling.
Well, thank you very much, man. And yeah, just always remember that there is no wrong way to play the game if you're enjoying yourself and you're not a detriment to others. So if it seems anxious, if it seems nerve-wracking, it'll get better. And if it seems really fun, keep doing it, because it's going to be awesome.
Like playing with a blanket on a bed.
Endwalker's either coming out already or you're already in it. Continue to enjoy it. You'll be happier than a bug in a rug or a dog in a bed.